Today I have with me every single light therapy lamp produced by Circadian Optics, and we are going to be testing and reviewing each one of them in depth. Now the reason we are doing this is because of a larger project where we are going to test every single light therapy lamp that we can get our hands on. Light therapy lamps are sort of an unregulated market. There's a lot of claims that are made. 10,000 lux. Every single listing says 10,000 lux, which if you know anything about lux or light therapy lamps, it's a pointless claim because they never tell you where 10,000 lux is. And 10,000 lux in and of itself is completely unnecessary in most cases to align your circadian rhythm. But let's go over the testing methods. We use a tiny little spectrometer, and this is the same thing that we use in Henry if you've seen our light therapy glasses videos. This allows us to measure the entire visible spectrum very accurately. Now the way we test our lights is we place the spectrometer about a foot away and we take a reading every minute for 60 minutes. The reason we do this is because the LEDs as they warm up will color shift and lux changes. Most manufacturers and companies will give you data on their lights based on a 1 minute snapshot of the light. So they'll turn it on, get a reading, and shut it back off. For example, every Circadian Optics light is advertised at 5500 Kelvin full spectrum light. Now the issue with this is that none of them are 5500 Kelvin, and I would hardly consider any of them full spectrum. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and go over all of the data that we gathered for these lights, and then I'll talk to you about each light in particular and why you may or may not want to buy one. So the first thing I want to talk about is the lux readings that we got. So if you look at this graph, the Lampu is by far the brightest light offered by Circadian Optics, followed by the Lattice, the Lumine, the Lumos 2.0, Luxi, and Leo. Now, Luxi is a bit of a standout here because of how small it is. So it's kind of amazing that it puts out as much lux as it does. And as you can see, not a single one of these hits that 10,000 lux advertisement. Not a big deal. It's just the reason we feel the need to test all of these is because of these sort of the false advertising that gets thrown around. But one thing to note here is that most people aren't going to be using a light at 1 foot. You might be 1.5 to 2 feet away from a light if you're using it at your desk. Now, I do want to show you what happens to lights over time. So you remember me telling you that we take a reading every minute? Well, this is what it looks like when you leave a lamp on for an hour. We did Lampu in a separate one because it's so much brighter than these that messes up my graph. But you can see that over time, the lux output normally drops. And that's why, again, you don't turn these on, measure them, and shut them off. No one's using a light therapy lamp for 1 minute. At the least, you're probably turning it on for 15, 20 minutes. And you can see that most of these lights lose about 200 lux within the first 20 minutes or so. Now the Lampu is a little bit different. It gets brighter over time. If we look at the graph, we can see that it starts at about 9,300 and it jumps all the way up to 9,700 by the end of the 60-minute time. You really never know with these lamps. Some get brighter, some get dimmer. That's why we take a 60-minute reading and then we just kind of average it out. Now, lux in and of itself isn't actually that great of a metric to use for circadian alignment. The whole point of a light therapy lamp is to wake you up in the morning. Now, there are other use cases. For example, if you're falling asleep too early, you might want to use one in the evening, but more often it's to help with seasonal affective disorder and depression and insomnia, in which case you're using it in the morning. But in any case, the issue with lux is that it's a measurement of brightness, not necessarily the spectral properties that trigger the photosensitive retinal ganglion cells that will tell your body that it's daytime. Instead, what we've done is we've used the LHRC's circadian stimulus calculator to determine circadian light. A circadian light is essentially an alternative to lux. You can think of circadian light as a weighted spectral lux that's a bit more specific to activating the circadian rhythm. Now, we do have a good example of the difference between lux and circadian light that I'd like to point out. If you look at the lux graph, specifically at the Lumine and the Lumos 2.0, you'll see that the Lumos is just a little lower in total lux output. But if we go ahead and look at the circadian light graph, we'll see that the Lumos produces almost 700 more circadian light units than the Lumine. And this is because the Lumos puts out a much bluer light spectrum. So it contains a bit more of the radiation that's going to activate your circadian rhythm, even though the Lux is lower. So it might appear a little bit brighter, but it isn't as effective at activating the circadian rhythm. Now that brings us to the color properties. So correlated color temperature, or CCT, is just a measurement of the equivalent black body radiation curve of a light. In other words, what color is it? The hotter an object gets, the more blue it is. The cooler it gets, the more orange it is. We measure that in Kelvin. Now, as I said before, Circadian Optics advertises 5500 Kelvin, which would be great, except they're not. Now, 5500 Kelvin is right around what you would see from a noonday clear sun. But as you can see on our graph, none of these lights are 5500 Kelvin. The Lumine and the Lampu are kind of close. Those are going to be most like the color of the sun, almost. After this, we'll go over the color rendering index, and you'll see that none of these are really that good as far as color rendering goes. But you'll also see that the Lumos is much bluer than the Lumine. You can see that the Lumos is at 6300, whereas the Lumine is 5700. And that is why the Lumos in those graphs before has more circadian light in it, even though the Lux is lower. But again, this is why we measure these. You really just can't trust manufacturer data. It's not very good, almost never is. Something else I wanted to show you guys as far as the color temperature goes is how they change over time. So we took a reading every minute for 60 minutes. And this is the graph of the color temperature change of these lights over time. So you see that all of them start lower and end higher. There are a few standouts, like the Lampu just got bluer and bluer and bluer, even up to the 60 minute, it really didn't stop getting bluer. But yeah, all of them are like that. As you can see, none of them are 5500 again. The Lumine actually does start at 5500. To Circadian Optics' credit, they did make one light that was 5500 Kelvin for the first minute. So, you know, you gotta hand it to them for that. But yeah, this is just the nature of LEDs. They shift as they get hot. Now, color rendering. Now, as far as these lamps go, the color rendering may not be your #1 priority, but it's something that we're going to collect just so we have it. To put it simply, color rendering index, or CRI, is simply a measurement of how accurately a light mimics natural sunlight. 100 would be sunlight. It would be indistinguishable from sunlight, more or less, to the human eye. As you can see, these lights are anywhere from 87.4 to 85.2. This is pretty typical of a blue pump phosphor LED. It's not great, it's not terrible, they're just kind of okay. There's really nothing to write home about here. The Lampu, which is the brightest light, actually is the lowest, whereas some of the other ones are just okay. I do want to show you at this point what these lights look like. On the screen, you'll see a spectral power distribution graph of sort of the average output of all of these lights. They're all very similar, and you can see that blue spike and then that kind of yellow pump. So essentially why you get that is almost all LEDs are blue LEDs with a phosphor coating over it. When that phosphor coating is lit up by the blue LED, it emits a round hump of light and you end up with a white LED. So that's kind of a typical looking LED. I wouldn't call these full spectrum. Circadian Optics calls them full spectrum, but that's what everyone does nowadays. Again, buzzwords. If you guys are interested in real full spectrum lights, we've got an article on our website. You can pick some up. They do exist. There are some really nice lights out there. Over time, hopefully we'll have a huge database of light therapy lamps. Hopefully we'll be able to find some lights that are a bit more sun-like than others. I'm planning on actually making my own here pretty soon, hopefully before the fall winter season. So stay tuned for that. I think it's gonna be pretty cool. Now, the other metric we measured is the size of the light. The thing about a light therapy lamp is they're very bright and they only output, a very small amount. For example, this is the Luxi. It's a very small lamp. It's actually pretty cool how small it is. But it puts out, you know, at 1 foot, almost 4,000 lux. It's super, super bright for the size. And so we have a measurement of glare, which is essentially just lux per square inch. Now this is at the brightest setting, so for all of these lights, you can turn them down. They have a low, medium, and high setting. But as you can see, the Luxy is at the top, followed by the Lumos, which has a pretty small illumination area, and then Lattice, Leo, Lampu, and Lumine. Lampu kind of stands out because it is the brightest, but it has a fairly low lux per square inch, and that's because it's so big. So what are my thoughts on these lights? Each light from Circadian Optics is fairly easy to operate. There's a capacitive touch button on every single one. It's just low, medium, high. So you have 3 brightness settings. They all have about a 7.3 foot cord, except for Luxy, which has just a USB cord, and I think it's about 5 feet. I'm not crazy about the capacitive button. They work very well, but I'm just more of a clicky guy. I like a tactile button. We're gonna go through each one, pros and cons, and why you might want to get one over another. The Lampu here is the brightest. It's got the lowest glare rating, and its color temperature is most like sun, while the color rendering index is the worst. So if you're looking for potentially the most comfortable and most effective light, this one's it. It's the most expensive light they offer. It's like $75, but that's not too bad for a light therapy lamp, especially one with this kind of output. Looking for the brightest one, it's the Lampu. Now the second runner-up for brightest is the Lattice. Now the Lattice is for someone who wants to put it on a shelf. It's not angled up at you, so it's not quite as effective just sitting on a desk. It also just looks really cool. It's, as far as I can tell, this is the most artistic light therapy lamp on the market. So if you're looking for something that's gonna just look a bit more like an art piece, this is a good one to buy. It's also very effective. These are all gonna be effective, so I wouldn't worry too much about that, but if you like a bright light, it's the Lampu or the Lattice. These are the brightest ones. I will say it also is pretty hefty. It's made out of plastic, but the base has like metal in it. It must. It actually feels pretty high quality. Like it doesn't feel like it's gonna like tip over, you know, like there's a fan on nearby or something. Next, as far as lux goes, is the Lumine. Now the Lumine I don't like. In terms of the lux output and the color temperature and all that is fine. The issue I have with it is this. So I tried to put this together. I literally could not get this all the way shut. I mean, I was squeezing it and I can't get it shut. And so I tried to pull it off, and there's these little, I'll show you. They have these little clips in here. You would assume, you know, you depress this clip and you're able to take the stand off. Well, they just break. If you just push down on the clip, it just snaps the plastic. Like these aren't actually flexible like they should be. They're just a hard plastic. It's just a bad design. You can read the reviews for this too. A lot of other people have had issues with this. For that reason, I just don't recommend this. If you want an angled light for your desk, you can either go with the Leo or the Lampu. I would just skip this one. The next one, and also quite unique like the Lattice, is the Lumos. Now the Lumos is just like an odd light therapy lamp. There aren't any other lamps like this one. You can kind of put it on a shelf or you can have it on your desk. It's a little bit more eye level, which some people might prefer. It does have all kinds of rotating capabilities, right? So you can kind of get it into a more odd angle, and it has a keyhole. So you could mount this potentially on something and really get it going somewhere. So if you've got an odd desk situation, this might be an interesting choice. It also folds like this. So again, put it on a shelf. It's versatile. It's definitely one of the most versatile light therapy lamps that I've come across. Next, the second least bright is the Leo. Now the Leo, I'm not totally sure what the use case is here. It's one of those desk angled ones, kind of like the Lumine or the Lampu. So I guess if you want a less bright, higher glare, cheaper Lampu, that would be the Leo. You know, if you don't want to spend $75 and you want to spend, you know, closer to 40 or however much this one is, Leo's a good choice. Just a little bit more difficult to look at. Now, one of the standouts and the last light that I'm gonna talk about is this little ditty. This is the Luxy. I actually really like this. It's got a micro USB. I'm not terribly ecstatic about that, but whatever. It's just super small. If you're looking for a good travel light therapy lamp, this is an excellent choice. As far as I can tell, this is one of the smallest light therapy lamps on the market. Super tiny. It's actually a lot smaller than I thought it would be. I was amazed when I got it. And it's super bright. It's very bright. As you can see, they've packed a ton. This is basically like a spotlight. So it isn't terribly comfortable, I will say. Like when it's on, it's a lot of light packed into a small surface area. But if you want something that you can kind of just like throw in a bag, take on a trip, take to and from work, this is gonna be an awesome option. And the USB portion means that you can power it off a laptop or a power bank or something like that. You don't need an AC plug nearby. So yeah, that's all the Circadian Optics lights. I hope you found this useful. Now we do have all the data and more on our website. If you go to our light therapy database, we've got circadian stimulus calculator, descriptions for all of the metrics that we measure, graphs, just tons of stuff. There's a lot more than we talked about in this video there. Maybe later on I'll do videos explaining circadian stimulus, circadian light, and all those things. But for now, that's about all I've got. If you guys like this video, I'd appreciate it if you could hit the like button. It helps out the channel a lot. Go ahead and subscribe if you're interested in seeing me build a full spectrum light therapy lamp, actually full spectrum. So that's in the future. Thanks guys. See ya.